Welcome to this edition of Labor Vision. Hi, I'm Bob Delaney, Executive Director of the Institute for Labor Studies and Research. Labor Vision, a production of the Institute, focuses on topics of importance to working Rhode Island families. This evening's edition will host Legislative Issues with Jim Parisi, where we bring the legislature into your living room. We hope you enjoy this edition of Legislative Issues and Labor Vision.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision, where we bring the General Assembly right into your living room. My name is James Parisi. I'm a field rep with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, and I'm your host this evening. This is the kickoff show for the 2015 legislative session, and before we talk about what labor is going to be working on this coming year, we thought we'd spend some time talking about how things worked out for the labor movement and working people last year. And joining us today is the person who would know best about what happened with all different aspects of legislation related to working people is AFL-CIO President George Nee. George, thanks for joining us.
Oh, pleasure to be here, and thank you for your continued service to the labor movement by hosting this show. So,
you know, this is my fifth season.
Yeah,
so,
and I know it's at some point an Emmy is on its way.
I won't be holding my breath for that Emmy.
Well, you know, we'll have to make sure that the right people vote on that.
There you go.
We actually, looking back on it and preparing for this show, for the labor movement and for working people in Rhode Island, 2014 was a very, very good year. We've had some bad years, so we know what to compare it to.
And the economy brought some really bad years, not only in terms of economics that people had to live with, but also some rights have been lost.
Oh, some rights have been lost. There's been some budgetary concerns. There's been job loss among state employees and municipal employees to balance budgets. So we've gone through some tough times, and hopefully we're on the rebound. But probably a very significant event last year was the largest increase in the history of the state of Rhode Island in its minimum wage. Mm-hmm. It went from $8 an hour, effective to $9 an hour on January 1st of 2015. That affects, you know, from the figures you get from the newspaper, different studies, about 40,000 Rhode Islanders are impacted by that kind of an increase. And for us and for all working people, it's important because we believe that that's how you build an economy, from the bottom up, put money in people's pocket. They have some purchasing power now. It helps the small business community, and it's a matter of economic fairness. So that was a very significant event. So in the last 2 years now, it's gone up $1.45. So it's still not what it should be, but put it in perspective, the federal minimum wage is still at $7.25 an hour. So in Rhode Island, if you're making $9, that's $1.75 an hour more that you're receiving because the state did the right thing. And I want to thank the members of the General Assembly and the governor for signing that legislation. We also had some, I think, significant improvements on the educational front. A lot of controversy about the kneecap exam. I think the legislature stepped up to the plate and realized that a high stakes testing, one exam is not the way to judge whether someone's ready to graduate from high school. Mm-hmm. So they deferred on that.
The kneecap is the New England Common Assessments Program. It's a statewide test that they give all high schoolers on certain subject areas, and they were trying to make it a graduation requirement.
Graduation requirement, and it was misnamed from the very beginning because 3 of the New England states don't even participate on it. So they should call it the half a kneecap. Also, there'd been a lot of controversy about teacher evaluations, particularly when the vast majority of our teachers do a terrific job and get a high evaluation. The legislature set up a program where if you got a very good valuation, you didn't have to have it every year. People felt that was taking a lot of time away from the teachers and the administrators and the superintendents to do that evaluation, and it was not in the best interest of good educational policy. So that was put in, and that was the champion on that was Representative Bill O'Brien, who really fought like that, fought very hard on that one.
Yeah, we had Bill O'Brien on our show last year talking about
terrific.
the bill, and then Senator Mary Ellen Goodwin carried the ball on the Senate side, along with Hannah Gallo as Education Committee Chair. A lot of people were involved in that issue.
that was really, and I think that as time has gone on, the teacher's voice, we hope, is being heard a lot stronger than it had been. For a while there, I think there was the leaders in our state, particularly at the Department of Education, thought the teachers had laryngitis or something. They weren't quite hearing what was happening, but I think that's changing a little bit now.
I think it is too.
Yeah. On the economic development front, very, very good year. We've already seen some evidence of that. The legislature passed legislation for a nursing school for both combined URI, RIC nursing school at down at what they call South Street Station now. And that's going to involve Brown University, those two colleges, private developers, and that's moving, and that should be hopefully a catalyst to some economic development activity. That was done without a bond issue, so that can get going very, very quickly. We also, the labor movement was supportive on 4 bond issues, all of which passed, one of which was a $75 million URI engineering school to bring URI into the modern era, which is, they've always had a terrific program. I don't know how they've done it, given the resources they've had and the buildings that they've occupied, but this will really create a first-class engineering program for the great URI school that we've got down there.
Right.
We also had environmental bond issues that help our environment and recreation. There was one on transportation to create hubs in downtown Providence to have an intermodal effect with our RIPTA system and our train system. And the other one was the Council of the Arts, which is really creative. It's the first time they've ever done this. Number of entities to do physical improvements, and the arts, I think, are being seen more and more as integral to an economic development program. So
it's part of our cultural fabric, but it also generates a lot of economic activity with people who are the artists, all the behind-the-scenes people who work on all these shows, productions, and museums.
And we've got a special niche there, and this is the first time I think people really saw that as being important. And interesting thing, the earlier polling showed that bond issue didn't look like it was going to be received favorably by the public. They did a masterful job of putting together coalitions with labor and business and the arts folks, and it passed by a pretty good margin. So that was very positive.
I think all of them also show a different direction, or at least a renewed focus on investment.
Yes.
And that's something that our newly elected governor has talked about quite a bit, that we really need to invest in our infrastructure, we need to make some improvements, and that's going to really move us forward in terms of economic development. And I think the voters recognize that message, not only in her election, but in voting on all these different bond issues.
Well, I think that's a good point, because you would think with the number that keeps showing up is the number of people who think Rhode Island's going in the wrong direction. People are very concerned about taxes. People are concerned about the economy. So here were 4, pretty expensive, significant bond issues. And when given a choice right in front of you, do you want the state to go forward? Do you want to invest in the future for your kids and your grandkids? People stepped up to the plate. So if you put a good project in front of people and they see some value to it, I think there is, people will respond to that. So I think that bodes well for moving the state around. So the problem with a lot of these bond issues is they take a couple of years to get moving. So we're actually now doing the chem building down at URI that was on the ballot 2 years ago. So these will, and also the Veterans Home, which passed a couple of years ago, is now starting to get into the construction phase. So it takes a while, but still we have to invest in the future if we're going anywhere.
Yeah, I got a lesson on that when we had Scott Duhamel on this show about the lag time. And I know the unemployment in the building trades has been high for a long time.
Yep.
I know they're anxious to get work, and it can't be soon enough, but at least people in those areas know that more work is coming now that these bonds have passed.
Right. We also had the second year in a row, which is, I think, again, an investment for the future and very critical to economic development, is expenditure for the Job Development Fund out of general revenue, which is the second year they've done that. But more importantly, this is something that's been a kind of a pet peeve for 20 years. We've had a thing called the indirect cost recovery, which took 10% of the money that was set aside for the job development fund for job training every year, and it was just sent back to the general revenue. Just no rhyme or reason. It was done to balance the budget in the 90s under Bruce Sunderland. That's how old it was.
And it's stuck around that long.
It's stuck. Well, you know what happens is you get in, when something gets there, it becomes revenue for the state. And you make the arguments, and you make the arguments, and the AFL-CIO and the business community testified for year after year saying, wait a minute, that money is set aside out of the unemployment insurance fund for job training, literacy, those type of programs. And it was never designed to be sent back to the general fund. This year, they got rid of it. So that now the Job Development Fund has an additional $1.3 million, which is now available, and the new governor now can come in knowing that that money is now available for some of her issues on job development. So that was a significant victory this year.
So because of changes in the state law and the budget process last year, we're going to see more money invested in education and training this year.
Yes, and a couple of them are very significant. One is that the state of Rhode Island is finally recognizing the value of apprenticeship programs. They have traditionally been something that's been associated with the building trades. We now have a mandate from the General Assembly to use some of these dollars to create what are being referred to now as non-trade apprenticeship programs. In fact, I saw this gentleman this morning, Tim Hebert from Lexion Corporation. He has set up an apprenticeship program for the IT workers at his company. He told me this morning he has 20 people in that apprenticeship program now because he understands the value of the concept, and it isn't something that just has to be done in the building trade. So we now have expanded into what he would refer to as IT or advanced manufacturing. We have now one in the marine trade industry. Imagine this, Rhode Island takes until last year to set up an apprenticeship program in the marine trade industry.
And we call ourselves the Ocean State.
We do, we do. So these are kind of, I think, things that the General Assembly has finally realized. You can't say that job training and a skilled workforce is important without putting the money on the table.
Sure. So what else do you have for us in terms of last year's activities?
Well, we had two other big ones. One you might be familiar with. I'll save that for last. And the other is the parking garage was put in the budget at the Garrahy Court Complex. $45 million project. It's dependent on the sale and development of 3 parcels of land for I-195, that commission.
Because the Garrahy Courthouse is right on the edge of new open space that we have from the 195 relocation.
And parking is still a big issue in downtown Providence, always has been, always will be. So the General Assembly put a provision in there to use funding to put it under the Convention Center Authority and use the bonding authority or bonding power of the Convention Center Authority, that if and when these 3 parcels are, ready for development, this could be a spur to that activity, because some of those companies that are coming in want to know, okay, if we come here, where are people going to park?
It's all about investing in infrastructure to generate economic activity.
Right, and I think we're finally getting it, and I think that bodes well. And of course, the last big victory was a very significant victory, and that was the defeat of the Constitutional Convention. And again, thank you for your service on that issue. You spearheaded that effort. As you know, that was on the ballot. It's required by our Constitution to have a vote every 10 years. It went before the voters. It was looking like it was going to pass, and it had all kinds of implications for working families, for minority groups, for women's groups. It would have been a very contentious and nasty process, particularly open to all kinds of the funding that comes in out of the state of Rhode Island, or from outside the state of Rhode Island. And that got beat 55 to 45. So again, that was a big victory, and that was one that if we had our way, it wouldn't get on the ballot every 10 years, but we were forced to deal with it, and we did.
And maybe we'll deal with that legislatively in the future.
Yeah,
maybe it should be every 20 years.
Or 50.
There you go. And it was tremendous for me to be one of the labor reps on this pretty broad-based community coalition. I mean, this was the labor movement working with Planned Parenthood and women's rights activists, the NAACP, the ACLU, a whole host of different organizations all sat down together to work on that campaign.
And it was a real coalition. A lot of times, as you know, people all put their name on something and they say, oh, I want to be a part of that. But in this one, you had to show up, you had to put up some money, and you had to work, and everybody did.
Minimum wage, teacher evaluation, a lot of new construction going on, defeat of a con-con. It really was a good year last year for working people in Rhode Island, wasn't it?
It even got better as the show went on.
Well, George, I thank you for coming in, spending some time talking about what happened last year. And folks, please stay tuned because the next show will be George Nee outlining what labor is going to be working on in the 2015 legislative session. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
My name's Jim Parisi. I'm a field rep with the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, but more importantly tonight, I'm president of the Rhode Island Labor History Society. We do some regular commemorations of important labor events, and last year some folks on our executive board said, you know what, we have an important 40th anniversary coming up. It was the anniversary of the death of a striking AFSCME member, Wilma Schesler. What we didn't realize at the time was that they actually named a street for, as we can see right up here at the corner of East and Wilma Schesler Lane. We thought there was a plaque here, but probably even more important, the name has been given permanently to this place because this is the location where the picket line was going on, and a Nage nurse drove through the picket line, killing Wilma and seriously injuring 2 other people. Most of you have some copies of some Providence Journal articles about that event 40 years ago, so at your convenience or even by candlelight, you can read some more of the details. But we just wanted to take a few minutes to commemorate the death of a striking union member who was out there because the state offer was inadequate and people were standing up for their rights at the time, and unfortunately someone came through the picket line at a high rate of speed, intoxicated, and someone paid the ultimate price of a labor strike by giving their life for the labor movement. And that's why the Labor History Society thought it was important to hold this event tonight, to spend a few minutes remembering an important event that happened 40 years ago. I'd like to call on the head of AFSCME Council 94, Mike Downey, to come on up here and say a few words on behalf of Wilma. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, James. And more importantly, thanks to the Labor History Society. It's a very proud moment for me tonight to stand out here and thank Sister Schesler for all the benefits that I have as a state employee. My name's Michael Downey. I'm a plumber at the University of Rhode Island, president of Rhode Island Council 94, but most importantly, a public employee. And it's people like Wilma. It's nice to see a street after Sister Wilma, named here at a very, very active local 1350. Doesn't surprise me that it would be someone from 1350 that would be out striking to make our benefits better. So I really want to thank the society, but more importantly, I came tonight to thank Wilma, because it's people like her that got me a contract that allows me to have days out of work. Makes a lot of people jealous, don't tell them all. But allows me to get time away from work to be with my family, take care of myself, and it's people like Sister Schesler that did that. She paid the ultimate sacrifice. I've been able to run around with all these different pickets and have a wonderful time doing it. And it's because of Wilma that I got to do that. So I'm here tonight certainly to thank the Historical Society, Labor Society, for remembering such an important person. But more importantly, for her to know, I thank her for losing her life to make things better for me and everybody I represent. So thank you, James, and thanks to all that made this night happen. But most importantly, thank you, Sister Wilma Schesler. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
I'm going to have Kwame speak, Kwame Lambi, who's the president of that local, speak for a moment. But perhaps before we do that, considering that we're here
remembering someone who passed away, knowing that Wilma, after she died, was carried back to Ohio, where her family buried her. There was a long procession to the airport. That's one of the newspaper articles where other union members wanted to remember her. Perhaps because it is a vigil in memory of a death, we could all observe a moment of silence for Sister Schesler. Thank you very much. Kwame Lamy, the president of 1350, the local of which Wilma was a member of. Thank you.
Thank you. I thank you all for being here. And this tells us that it's good to be a union. At least tonight we are here in our numbers. And I also thank you all for the honor of our sister Wilma. And even though her life was dim 40 years ago, we are still remembering her. She was her contribution to the local. She was a very dedicated member, and her contribution to the local is well remembered. May her soul rest in peace. And fortunately for us, we have Tony here, who was here at that time. And I would like to at least.
Thank you, brother. I want to allow anyone else who would like to say a word to come up here in a moment, but let me just highlight a little more of what you'll read about if you take a look at those newspaper articles. The actual 40th anniversary was last month. Our society was having another event in November and we couldn't pull it off, but the actual strike was on November 9th, 10th, 11th. Those are the dates. And when I was taking a look at the newspaper articles, doing the research on this, it was days after an election. And there was other articles in that same newspaper about this young kid named Buddy Cianci who had just been elected mayor. And there was some important articles about the strike as well. Not so many articles about the death, but there were some. The driver of the car, the nurse who also worked for the state, drove through the picket line this way. Went through the picket line. The pickets were, crossing this street and some other streets because the strike involved not only the workers at the hospital, IMH, but also the lad school, I believe the training school. There were other workers on strike. But this striker, once she went through the line, she actually kept going a couple of blocks and didn't stop right away. And that caused some great scandal, some great anxiety amongst the union members, some of whom I've heard from. I got a call from someone who was noting that she got off really lightly, perhaps because her father was a doctor working for the state government and was wondering whether or not there was a little bit of excessive leniency for someone who actually killed someone who was engaging in protected activity. So I just want you all to keep that in mind. Is there anyone else who'd like to say a word before we conclude the event? George, thank you. George Neep, president of the Rhode Island AFL-CIO.
I think that when we have an event like this, all of us, and I think Mike made a very poignant point. The way that we can best remember Sister Wilma is that we continue to dedicate ourselves and remember those who came before us and struggled and sacrificed and went on strike and in some cases, and in this instance, died, so that we can have a labor movement, so that we have a solemn obligation to remember those who made those sacrifices. And the best way that we do that, to honor their memories and honor their sacrifices, is recommit ourselves to the struggle, particularly in the difficult times that we live in this country and in our state, to continue to fight for justice, for solidarity, to improve the wages, benefits, and working conditions, and to make sure that workers have not just good wages, benefits, and working conditions, but they have a say in their life. They have a say on what happens to them in their communities and on the job. And that's how we honor someone who made that ultimate sacrifice. And for your presence here tonight, you're making that recommitment. And let's go forward and make life better for all the workers in her memory tonight. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you all very much for coming. For those of you who have a few minutes and you'd like to honor Wilma by having a drink, a couple of us are going up to PJ's Pub, which is a mile and a half or so up the street, past
Shell on the left.
and it'll be on the left-hand side.
Right across the alley. But I won't be able to go tonight, so my thoughts will be with you.
All right. Thank you all very much for coming.
He's a little underage.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Labor Vision. We appreciate your input and encourage your comments. Labor Vision can be seen on this channel 3 times each week: Tuesday at 7 p.m., Thursday at 8 p.m., and Saturday at 5 p.m.